People are not broke because they don't make money. They are broke because nobody ever taught them how money actually behaves. They were taught how to obey, how to survive, how to stay busy, how to wake up exhausted and call it responsibility. But nobody sat them down and explained why a person can earn more than their parents ever earned and still panic when rent is due. Nobody explained why someone making six figures can still feel trapped. Nobody explained why millions of people work harder every year, yet somehow own less of their own lives. And that is where this audiobook begins. Not with fantasy, not with fake motivation, not with the lie that wealth is quick, but with truth. Because the moment you understand the real rules of financial literacy in modern life, your entire relationship with money changes. In this audiobook, Financial Literacy, Why You're Still Broke, you're going to uncover the emotional habits, hidden systems, psychological traps, and daily behaviors that quietly keep people financially stuck for decades without even realizing it. You will learn why discipline matters more than income, why emotional spending destroys futures, why modern distraction is designed to keep you poor, why financial stress is often a thinking pattern before it becomes a bank balance, why some people escape the cycle while others stay trapped inside it their entire lives. And most importantly, you will learn how to rebuild your relationship with money from the ground up. This audiobook is educational and motivational. It is not financial advice. It is a wake-up call. Because one sentence can change the direction of a life. And here is the sentence that may change yours. Being broke is temporary. Staying financially unconscious is permanent. Think about that. There are people who lose everything and rebuild. And there are people who earn everything and still collapse. The difference is rarely intelligence. The difference is awareness. Because money amplifies who you already are. If you are disciplined, money expands your freedom. If you are careless, money expands your chaos. If you are patient, money rewards you slowly. If you are emotional, money punishes you immediately. Most people do not have a money problem. They have an identity problem. They still think like survivors while trying to become builders. And survival thinking creates survival results. You see it everywhere now. People buying things they cannot afford just to look successful online. People financing lifestyles instead of building assets. People trapped in subscriptions, debt cycles, dopamine loops, instant gratification, emotional comparison, algorithmic envy. The modern economy is no longer just competing for your money. It is competing for your attention. And attention is the front door of financial control. Because whatever controls your focus eventually controls your future. That is why some people stay financially stuck for 20 years without understanding why. Not because they are lazy, but because they are mentally exhausted, overstimulated, emotionally distracted, constantly reacting, always consuming, rarely thinking. A distracted person becomes easy to sell to. That is the modern trap. You are told to consume before you learn to build. You are taught how to spend before you understand ownership. You are encouraged to impress strangers before securing your own future, and slowly, quietly, invisibly, your financial life begins leaking energy. One subscription, one impulsive purchase, one emotional decision, one unnecessary upgrade, one paycheck spent before it even arrives. Until eventually you wake up one day wondering why you feel trapped despite working constantly. And maybe that is where you are right now. Maybe you are tired, not physically, soul tired, tired of trying, tired of restarting, tired of pretending things are fine, tired of watching everybody online look rich while you quietly feel behind. But listen carefully. You are not weak for feeling overwhelmed. Modern financial pressure is psychological warfare. 24-hour advertising, infinite comparison, endless temptation, status culture, fear culture, urgency culture. Every app wants your attention. Every company wants your impulse. Every platform profits from your distraction. And if you do not build awareness intentionally, the world will build dependency automatically. That is why financial literacy today is not just about numbers. It is about emotional control. The person who controls their emotions eventually controls their money. The person who cannot control their emotions will eventually lose both. And that truth changes everything, because now the conversation becomes deeper than budgeting. Now we are talking about identity. Who are you when nobody is watching? Can you delay pleasure? Can you stay patient? Can you say no? Can you ignore social pressure? Can you build quietly? Can you stop performing wealth and start creating it? That is where freedom begins. Not when you buy something, when you stop needing to prove something. There is a reason financially disciplined people often move differently. They are not trying to look rich. They are trying to become unshakable. And those are completely different goals. One chases appearance, the other builds stability. One needs applause, the other needs peace. One buys symbols, the other buys time. And time is the real currency of wealth, not money. Money can disappear, time cannot return. Every bad financial habit is stealing future time from your life. Every debt built carelessly is future labor already promised away. That is why financial stress feels so heavy emotionally, because deep down, people are not just afraid of losing money. They are afraid of losing control over their future, and maybe nobody has ever explained it to you this way before. Maybe nobody told you that financial freedom is less about becoming rich and more about becoming difficult to control. Because when you are desperate, people can manipulate you. When you are unstable, fear controls your choices. When you are drowning financially, survival replaces vision. That is why literacy matters, not for ego, for freedom, real freedom. The ability to think clearly, to leave toxic environments, to say no without panic, to rest without guilt, to build slowly without desperation. That kind of freedom does not happen accidentally. It is built quietly, daily, patiently. And the first step is brutally honest awareness. You must stop lying to yourself. That is where every transformation begins, not with motivation, with honesty. Are you spending emotionally? Are you buying distractions instead of building discipline? Are you consuming more than creating? Are you addicted to comfort? Are you avoiding responsibility? Are you waiting for a breakthrough while repeating the same habits? Because if your habits stay the same, your financial future usually does too. And this is important. Your income can rise while your mindset stays poor. That is one of the biggest traps in modern life. People think higher income automatically creates wealth. But without literacy, higher income often just creates higher expenses. A bigger apartment, a more expensive car, more subscriptions, more lifestyle pressure, more comparison, more hidden anxiety. The outside improves, the inside stays unstable. That is why some people earn more every year yet feel poorer emotionally, because they upgraded their image without upgrading their awareness. And awareness is the beginning of financial intelligence. The moment you begin questioning your habits, you begin reclaiming your future. If this opening already resonates with you, take a moment later to comment the sentence that hit you hardest. Not for the algorithm, for yourself. Because sometimes writing one honest sentence becomes the first contract you make with your future identity. Now, before we move into the first real chapter of this audiobook, you need to understand the most dangerous financial lie modern society ever normalized. The lie that being busy means you are progressing, because millions of people are exhausted every single day without actually moving forward. And once you see how that trap works, you will never look at work, money, or your own habits the same way again. Dear friends, we've just started working on this channel, so we'd really appreciate your support. Please like the video and leave a few words in the comments. It'll really help us promote it. We'd be very grateful. Let's keep going. Chapter 1. The illusion of progress. There are people waking up at 5 in the morning every day, sprinting through traffic, answering emails before sunrise, working 12-hour shifts, coming home mentally empty, and still moving nowhere financially. Not because they are stupid, not because they are incapable, because they confuse movement with direction, and modern society rewards that confusion. You are praised for being busy, praised for being exhausted, praised for sacrificing yourself endlessly. But almost nobody asks the most important question. Is all this effort actually building freedom? Because effort without strategy becomes a treadmill. You burn energy, you sweat, you struggle, but you stay in the same place. That is one of the cruelest financial traps of modern life. The illusion of progress. You feel productive because you are constantly occupied. But internally, your future is not expanding. Your debt grows faster than your savings. Your stress grows faster than your income. Your distractions grow faster than your discipline. And eventually, your life becomes maintenance instead of growth. Just surviving the next bill, the next month, the next emergency, the next paycheck. That is not freedom. That is financial survival wearing professional clothes. And survival is expensive. People in survival mode make emotional decisions, short-term decisions, fear-based decisions. They say yes too quickly, spend too impulsively, stay in toxic environments too long, avoid risks that could change their lives, ignore opportunities because exhaustion has reduced their imagination. That is what chronic financial stress does. It shrinks your thinking. A financially stressed mind stops asking, "What can I build?" and starts asking, "How do I survive until Friday?" That shift is dangerous because your questions shape your future. The quality of your financial life is deeply connected to the quality of the questions you ask yourself daily. Most people never notice this. They only notice symptoms, the anxiety, the overdraft notifications, the pressure, the arguments, the quiet shame, the jealousy scrolling through social media. But beneath all of it, there is usually a broken relationship with time, attention, and emotional control. You see, money is deeply emotional now, more than ever before. Apps are designed to trigger impulse. Stores are engineered around psychology. Algorithms study your weaknesses. Advertisements are personalized to your insecurities. You are not fighting simple spending habits anymore. You are fighting billion-dollar systems designed to monetize your lack of awareness. And if you do not consciously train discipline, you will unconsciously train consumption. That is why financial literacy today must become emotional literacy too, because every purchase tells a story. Some purchases say, I am building. Others say, I am escaping. And many people spend not because they need something, but because they need relief. Relief from stress, relief from boredom, relief from insecurity, relief from loneliness, relief from feeling behind. That is why emotional spending feels good briefly and painful later. It gives temporary comfort while quietly damaging long-term stability. A person can destroy years of financial progress through unhealed emotional patterns. That is why self-awareness matters more than income. A disciplined person with an average salary often builds more stability than an impulsive person with a high salary, because wealth is not only built by earning, it is protected by behavior, and behavior is shaped by identity. This is where most financial advice fails people. It talks about numbers without talking about psychology, but psychology is the hidden engine behind every financial decision. Why do people overspend? Why do they procrastinate? Why do they ignore investing? Why do they avoid budgeting? Why do they panic? Why do they chase status? Because money activates emotion, fear, validation, shame, comparison, ego, scarcity. If you do not understand your emotional patterns around money, your habits will quietly sabotage your future. That is why some people sabotage themselves the moment they start succeeding. The moment more money enters their life, their identity becomes unstable. Instead of building assets, they buy approval. Instead of creating security, they create appearance. And appearance is expensive, especially in 2025, because now comparison never sleeps. A person opens their phone at 7 a.m. and immediately sees luxury vacations, designer clothes, expensive apartments, startup founders, crypto millionaires, influencers pretending to live perfect lives. And subconsciously, they begin feeling behind, even if their own life is progressing. That is the poison of constant comparison. It destroys gratitude, and gratitude is essential for financial clarity. A person who constantly feels behind becomes vulnerable to impulsive decisions, because insecurity creates urgency, and urgency destroys patience. That is why financially intelligent people protect their attention carefully. They understand something powerful. If everybody can influence your desires, eventually everybody can influence your spending. So they become intentional. They learn to pause, to think, to breathe before purchasing, to question before consuming, to ask themselves, am I buying value or emotion? That one question can save someone years of financial pain, because emotional purchases rarely solve emotional problems. They only delay them. And delayed problems often return heavier. That is why some closets are full while minds stay empty. Some garages are full while savings accounts stay weak. Some lifestyles look impressive while anxiety quietly grows in the background. People are performing success while internally fearing collapse. That pressure becomes exhausting. Trying to maintain an image, trying to look stable, trying to appear successful enough. Meanwhile, real wealth often grows quietly, slowly, patiently, without performance. Most financially strong people are less flashy than society expects, because mature wealth understands something immature wealth does not. Attention attracts pressure. That is why financially intelligent people stop trying to look rich. They focus on becoming resilient. There is a huge difference. A person trying to look rich asks, what will impress people? A person trying to become free asks, What will reduce pressure 5 years from now? Those questions create completely different lives. One builds temporary validation. The other builds long-term peace. And peace is one of the greatest luxuries money can protect. Not luxury cars, not status symbols, not applause. Peace. The ability to sleep without panic, to breathe without checking bank notifications constantly, to make decisions without desperation controlling every thought. That is wealth, too. In fact, many people chasing money are actually chasing emotional safety without realizing it. They think they want millions, but often what they truly want is relief. Relief from uncertainty, relief from instability, relief from fear. That realization changes how you approach financial growth, because now money becomes less about ego and more about emotional stability. And emotional stability requires discipline, not punishment. Discipline. The ability to think long-term while emotions scream short-term. That is rare now. Modern culture trains immediacy, instant food, instant entertainment, instant shopping, instant dopamine, instant validation. But real wealth grows slowly, like roots underground, invisible at first. That invisibility frustrates people because social media trained everyone to expect visible results immediately. But financial growth often looks boring in the beginning. Quiet saving, quiet learning, quiet investing, quiet consistency. No applause, no dramatic transformation overnight, just gradual strength. And most people quit before strength compounds. That is the tragedy. They stop one chapter before momentum changes everything. They plant seeds, then dig them up daily looking for proof. Patience is now a financial superpower because the modern world profits from your impatience. Impatient people buy emotionally, switch plans constantly, chase trends, fall for scams, seek shortcuts, ignore fundamentals. Patient people build quietly, systematically, intentionally, and eventually their lives begin separating from the crowd. Not dramatically at first, but gradually. Their stress decreases, their options increase, their confidence stabilizes, their thinking expands, because financial stability changes the nervous system. A person with breathing room thinks differently than a person trapped in panic. That is why building stability matters deeply. Not to impress others, to reclaim mental clarity. And maybe nobody told you this before, but exhaustion is expensive. An exhausted person makes weaker decisions, weaker food choices, weaker spending choices, weaker emotional choices, weaker long-term choices. That is why burnout and bad financial habits often live together. When people are mentally drained, discipline becomes harder. That is why your health and finances are connected. Your attention and finances are connected. Your environment and finances are connected. Everything is connected. A distracted life usually becomes an expensive life. And this next truth may hit hard. Sometimes being broke is not about lack of money. Sometimes it is about lack of focus. Scattered energy creates scattered results. People say they want financial freedom while spending 6 hours daily consuming distractions. They say they want change while refusing to change their habits. And habits always reveal priorities. Always. Not intentions, not words, not dreams, habits. What you repeat becomes your future. That means every day matters, every small decision matters, every ignored habit matters. Because life compounds quietly. Debt compounds. Skills compound. Discipline compounds. Distraction compounds. Consistency compounds. Your future is being built right now through repetition. That should both terrify and empower you because it means transformation is possible, slowly, daily, deliberately. And in the next chapter, we are going to expose one of the most dangerous emotional addictions keeping people financially trapped today. The addiction to looking successful before becoming stable. And once you understand how deeply performance culture manipulates financial behavior, you will never spend money the same way again. Chapter 2. The Performance Trap. There are people drowning financially while looking successful online. And that sentence explains more about modern money problems than most financial textbooks ever will. Because today, people are no longer only buying things for utility. They are buying identity, buying status, buying perception, buying belonging, buying the illusion that they are doing better than they actually are. That is the performance trap. And it quietly destroys millions of lives, not overnight, slowly, one financed lifestyle at a time, one emotional purchase at a time, one desperate attempt to appear successful enough. You see it everywhere now, people upgrading phones they barely use professionally, buying cars that silently stress them every month, ordering things they never needed because social media convinced them their current life was not enough. And underneath all of it is one dangerous emotional question. What will people think of me? That question has bankrupted more futures than lack of opportunity ever did. Because insecurity is expensive. A secure person buys intentionally. An insecure person buys emotionally. That is why confidence and financial literacy are connected more deeply than most people realize. People who truly value themselves usually do not need constant symbols to prove it. But people struggling internally often try to repair emotional emptiness externally. Not because they are bad people, because they are hurting. Because modern culture trained them to confuse visibility with value. The algorithm rewards appearance, but life rewards stability. Those are different systems, and if you follow the wrong system long enough, your financial life becomes theater, a performance, a carefully edited version of reality. You start buying for reactions instead of usefulness. You stop asking, does this improve my future? And start asking, does this improve my image? That shift is dangerous because image has no ceiling. There will always be somebody richer, somebody younger, somebody more successful, somebody more visible. Comparison never ends. That is why chasing external validation financially becomes an unwinnable game. You exhaust yourself trying to keep up with people who may secretly be drowning too. That is one of the hidden truths of modern life. Many people showing wealth do not own peace. Many people performing luxury own massive stress. Many people appearing successful are financially fragile behind the scenes. Debt hidden behind fashion. Anxiety hidden behind smiles. Pressure hidden behind aesthetics. And social media rarely shows the emotional invoice, only the highlight reel. That is why financial literacy now requires emotional independence. You must become difficult to manipulate. You must learn how to separate desire from programming. Because many desires are not even yours anymore. They were installed by marketing, by comparison, by culture, by insecurity, by repeated exposure. The average person sees thousands of advertisements daily now. Thousands. Some direct, some subtle, some disguised as entertainment, some disguised as lifestyle inspiration. And slowly, those images begin shaping standards unconsciously. What success should look like, what attractiveness should look like, what happiness should look like, what status should look like. And eventually, people begin spending money trying to match a script they never consciously chose. That is why awareness matters. Without awareness, you become programmable, and programmable people become profitable. Think carefully about this. Why do some people buy things immediately after feeling emotionally low? Why do stress and spending often appear together? Because emotional discomfort creates vulnerability. Companies understand this deeply. That is why modern marketing rarely sells products anymore. It sells emotional transformation, not shoes, confidence, not watches, status, not cars, identity, not vacations, escape. Everything is emotional now. That is why financially disciplined people learn to pause before purchasing. They do not just ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "Why do I want this right now?" That second question changes lives, because sometimes the desire disappears the moment honesty appears. Maybe you do not need the purchase. Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need purpose. Maybe you need direction. Maybe you need self-respect. Maybe you are trying to fill emotional emptiness with temporary stimulation, and temporary stimulation always fades. That is why emotional spending creates cycles. Short relief, long regret. Short dopamine, long pressure. Short excitement, long-term consequences. And consequences compound quietly. Most financial disasters begin as small, repeated habits, not dramatic collapse. Daily leakage, coffee here, subscription there, impulse shopping, emotional eating, unnecessary upgrades, tiny justifications repeated for years. People underestimate small decisions because small decisions feel harmless. But repeated habits build entire lives. A leaking faucet can empty a reservoir slowly. That is how many people lose financial control. Not through one giant mistake, through thousands of unconscious ones. And the dangerous part is this: modern society normalizes financial dysfunction. Being overwhelmed is normalized. Being in debt is normalized. Impulse buying is normalized. Living paycheck to paycheck is normalized. Using shopping as therapy is normalized. So people stop questioning behaviors that are quietly damaging them. They think stress is just adulthood. No. Chronic financial chaos is not maturity, it is misalignment. And one of the biggest forms of misalignment is trying to look financially successful before becoming financially stable, because appearance-focused living creates pressure-focused living. Every image must be maintained, every status symbol defended, every lifestyle upgraded continuously. That becomes exhausting. Some people are not working to build freedom anymore. They are working to maintain appearances. That is a prison disguised as success. And prisons become dangerous when society applauds them. That is why financially intelligent people become comfortable with simplicity, not because they lack ambition, because they understand delayed gratification. They know temporary restraint can create permanent freedom. Most people reverse this. They choose temporary pleasure and create permanent pressure, but disciplined people choose temporary discipline and slowly create lasting peace. That is the difference. And this next part matters deeply. There is no shame in starting over financially. None. The shame is refusing to become aware. Because awareness creates possibility. The moment you stop lying to yourself, your future begins changing. That is true in every area of life, especially money. You must become radically honest, not emotionally cruel to yourself. Honest. What habits are keeping you trapped? What emotions trigger spending? What insecurities influence your decisions? What environments encourage bad behavior? What people pressure you financially? What distractions are draining your focus? Those questions matter because clarity creates power, and power begins with self-observation. Financially strong people observe themselves carefully. They notice patterns. They notice emotional triggers. They notice weak moments. They notice impulsive tendencies. And instead of pretending those patterns do not exist, they build systems around them. That is real maturity, not perfection. Awareness. For example, a financially disciplined person may avoid scrolling social media when feeling emotionally low because they know comparison weakens judgment. That is intelligence. Another person may automate savings because they know relying on motivation is unreliable. That is intelligence too. Real financial literacy is not just knowing information. It is designing behavior that changes everything. Because knowledge without behavior changes nothing. A person can read 50 books about money and still sabotage themselves emotionally every month. Why? Because information alone does not transform identity. Repetition does. That is why your environment matters deeply. Your routines matter. Your friendships matter. Your digital habits matter. Your conversations matter. If everybody around you worships appearance, discipline becomes harder. If everybody normalizes chaos, stability begins feeling strange. That is why protecting your mind matters financially. The voices around you shape your standards, and standards shape behavior. People rarely rise above the environments they consume daily. That includes digital environments too. Your phone is not neutral anymore. It trains your nervous system constantly. Fast content trains impatience. Comparison trains insecurity. Consumerism trains dissatisfaction, and dissatisfaction is profitable. A grateful person spends differently than an insecure person. That is why gratitude is financially powerful. Not because gratitude magically creates money, because gratitude reduces emotional desperation. A desperate mind makes reckless decisions. A grounded mind thinks long-term. That is why peace is productive. And maybe this next sentence will stay with you. The people hardest to manipulate are the people comfortable with themselves. Read that again, internally, because confidence reduces unnecessary consumption. When you truly know your worth, you stop trying to purchase identity. You stop chasing approval through appearance. And that shift saves people years of financial pain. Now listen carefully. None of this means never enjoying life. That is not the message. Financial literacy is not punishment. It is intentionality. Enjoying your money consciously is healthy. Destroying your future emotionally is different. The goal is balance, freedom, awareness, stability, purpose, not obsession. Because money should become a tool, not your master. And the people who master money emotionally usually master life more calmly too. Because discipline transfers. A disciplined financial life often creates a disciplined mental life. More clarity, more peace, more confidence, more patience. And patience is becoming increasingly rare in this world, which is exactly why it is becoming increasingly valuable. In the next chapter, we are going to uncover one of the most painful financial truths people avoid confronting. Why increasing income alone rarely fixes a broken financial identity. Because some people earn more every year, while secretly becoming poorer in every way that matters. And once you understand why that happens, you will begin looking at wealth completely differently. Chapter 3. Why more money doesn't fix a financially broken mind. There is a moment many people dream about for years. The raise finally comes. The business starts growing. The new clients arrive. The salary increases. The numbers improve. And for a brief moment, they feel relief. They think, this is it. Everything is finally going to change. But then something strange happens. A few months later, the pressure returns. The anxiety returns. The stress returns. The panic returns. And they cannot understand why. Because they solved the income problem, but never solved the identity problem. That is one of the hardest truths in financial literacy. More money magnifies habits. It does not automatically heal them. If somebody lacks discipline while earning little, they often lack discipline while earning more. The scale changes. The behavior stays. That is why some people become richer financially while remaining emotionally unstable. They upgrade lifestyles faster than they upgrade awareness. And lifestyle inflation quietly becomes a trap, a dangerous one, because every financial upgrade creates new expectations. A more expensive apartment, a more expensive social circle, more expensive habits, more expensive standards. Suddenly, the income that once felt life-changing starts feeling normal, then insufficient, then stressful, and the cycle repeats again. That is why many high earners secretly feel trapped, not because they lack money, because they built lives too expensive to breathe inside. That sentence matters. A life that looks successful can still feel emotionally suffocating. Many people are financially overextended, trying to maintain an image they no longer even enjoy, working harder not for freedom, but to sustain pressure. That is not wealth. That is sophisticated survival. And modern culture rarely teaches people how dangerous lifestyle inflation becomes emotionally. Because once comfort rises, humility often disappears. People stop asking, what do I truly need? And start asking, what else can I upgrade? That mindset never ends. There is always another level of consumption available, another gadget, another trend, another experience, another symbol. That is why external success without internal discipline becomes unstable. The appetite grows faster than peace, and appetite without awareness creates endless dissatisfaction. That is why gratitude matters financially more than most people understand. A grateful person can build patiently. An ungrateful person stays emotionally hungry no matter how much arrives. And emotional hunger is expensive. It pushes people into constant chasing, more validation, more luxury, more recognition, more proof. But proof for who? That is the hidden question many never confront. Who are you trying to convince? Strangers? Family? Friends? Your past self? Your own insecurities? Because unresolved insecurity can quietly become a financial addiction. The need to prove yourself externally can destroy your internal stability. That is why emotionally mature people eventually realize something powerful. Real wealth is not loud. Real wealth often looks calm. A calm nervous system, a flexible schedule, low desperation, clear thinking, space to breathe, space to rest, space to choose. That is luxury too. In fact, many people would trade their expensive lifestyles instantly for peace if they were honest. But ego traps them, because once people build identities around appearance, they fear simplifying. They fear judgment. They fear seeming unsuccessful. They fear losing status. So they stay trapped in lifestyles that secretly exhaust them. That is why financial literacy requires courage. The courage to live differently. The courage to stop performing. the courage to build quietly while others chase visibility. And visibility culture is dangerous now because attention has become currency. Everybody wants to be seen, validated, recognized, but being seen is not the same as being secure. And confusing those two things creates chaos. A financially secure person thinks differently. They prioritize stability over applause, future flexibility over temporary image, long-term freedom over short-term excitement. That mindset changes everything because financially disciplined people understand something emotional spenders often ignore. Every purchase has a hidden future cost, not just financially, mentally, emotionally. Every unnecessary financial obligation quietly steals future flexibility. That car payment, future pressure, that impulsive debt, future stress, that unnecessary upgrade, future responsibility. And responsibilities compound. People rarely calculate emotional cost, only financial cost. But emotional cost matters deeply. A financially overextended life creates psychological weight, the constant need to maintain, to produce, to perform, to keep up. That pressure eventually affects relationships too. People become impatient, reactive, exhausted, disconnected. Financial instability often leaks into emotional instability. That is why literacy matters beyond money. It shapes the quality of your entire life. And maybe this next truth will challenge you deeply. Some people are addicted to financial chaos because calm feels unfamiliar. They grew up around instability, stress, urgency, scarcity. So subconsciously, peace feels strange. When life becomes stable, they create unnecessary problems, overspend, self-sabotage, make reckless choices, ignore discipline, because their nervous system became attached to intensity. That pattern is real, and healing it requires awareness. You must learn how to become emotionally comfortable with stability, comfortable with patience, comfortable with slow growth, comfortable with ordinary disciplined days, because real financial growth is often repetitive, not dramatic. Small, wise decisions repeated consistently. That sounds boring to people addicted to excitement, but boring habits often build extraordinary lives. That is one of the great paradoxes of wealth. Financial freedom is usually built through unexciting consistency. Budgeting, saving, learning, investing carefully, avoiding unnecessary debt, improving skills, protecting attention, thinking long-term, simple behaviors, repeated for years. Meanwhile, many people search for shortcuts because consistency feels too slow. That is why scams thrive. Emotionally impatient people become vulnerable. The promise of instant wealth seduces those unwilling to respect gradual growth. And the modern world profits heavily from impatience. Get rich quick, go viral instantly, become successful overnight. Scale immediately, luxury now, results now. But fast success without internal maturity often collapses fast too, because character eventually becomes the ceiling of sustainability. A person can temporarily outperform their habits, but they cannot sustainably outrun them. That is why identity matters more than income. Your financial future is hidden inside your daily behavior, not your fantasies, not your intentions, your routines. What do you do repeatedly? Do you avoid discomfort? Do you spend emotionally? Do you procrastinate difficult conversations? Do you ignore planning? Do you seek validation constantly? Do you numb stress through consumption? Those patterns matter because repeated emotional habits quietly become financial outcomes. That is why awareness is powerful. Awareness interrupts autopilot, and most people are living financially on autopilot. Wake up, work, consume, escape stress, repeat. Years pass quickly that way, terrifyingly quickly. One day becomes 5 years. 5 years becomes 15. And suddenly people wonder where their freedom went. But freedom was being traded daily through unconscious decisions. That is why financial literacy is ultimately about intentional living, not perfection. Intentionality, choosing consciously instead of reactively. And reactive living is expensive. Emotionally reactive people often become financially reactive too. A bad day becomes spending. Stress becomes spending. Loneliness becomes spending. Celebration becomes overspending. Insecurity becomes overspending. Everything becomes emotional consumption. But disciplined people build emotional space before decisions. They pause. That pause changes lives because most bad financial decisions happen impulsively. A calm mind sees differently than an emotionally activated one. That is why protecting mental clarity matters financially. Sleep matters, health matters, focus matters, environment matters. An exhausted brain seeks easy dopamine, and modern society offers endless opportunities to consume dopamine instantly. That is why attention management is now a financial skill. People who cannot protect focus usually struggle protecting money too, because both require restraint, both require awareness, both require the ability to delay immediate gratification for future benefit. And that ability is becoming rare, which means it is becoming valuable. Now listen carefully to this next sentence. The future belongs to people who can stay disciplined in a distracted world. That includes financially, especially financially, because distractions are no longer harmless. They are profitable industries. Your lack of focus funds somebody else's success constantly. Every hour lost mindlessly consuming, every impulse purchase, every emotionally reactive decision. Somebody profits from your lack of awareness. That is why reclaiming control matters deeply, not just financially, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. You must stop living automatically. You must become conscious again, conscious of habits, conscious of emotions, conscious of environments, conscious of patterns, because consciousness creates change. And maybe for the first time, you are beginning to realize this audiobook is not truly about money alone. It is about self-mastery, because money amplifies who you are. If you are calm, it amplifies peace. If you are disciplined, it amplifies freedom. If you are impulsive, it amplifies chaos. If you are insecure, it amplifies performance. That is why inner work and financial growth cannot stay separated forever. Eventually they meet, and when they do, everything changes. In the next chapter, we are going to uncover the hidden emotional wound that quietly controls millions of financial decisions every single day. Scarcity, the fear that there will never be enough. And until that fear is understood, many people continue sabotaging abundance without even realizing it. Chapter 4. Scarcity is not just a money problem. It is a psychological prison. There are people earning enough to breathe, but still living as if disaster is always one step away. Still panicking, still hoarding, still afraid, still emotionally tense every time money leaves their account. Why? Because scarcity is not always about reality. Sometimes it is about conditioning, and conditioning can quietly control a person long after circumstances improve. A child who grew up hearing, "We can't afford that," every week may become an adult who fears spending even when financially stable. Another child who watched money create arguments, betrayal, or stress may unconsciously associate wealth with danger. Someone raised around instability may become addicted to financial anxiety because calm feels unfamiliar. That is how deep scarcity goes. It becomes emotional, not logical. And emotional scarcity changes behavior in ways people rarely notice. Some become obsessive savers, but never truly live. Others become reckless spenders because, deep down, they believe money disappears anyway. Some undercharge for their work because they subconsciously feel undeserving. Others tolerate toxic jobs because fear convinces them there are no alternatives. Scarcity whispers constantly, "Don't risk, don't try, stay safe. You're already behind. There's never enough." And eventually, people stop building futures. They start protecting limitations. That is one of the saddest transformations a person can experience when survival thinking becomes identity. Because survival thinking shrinks imagination. A person trapped in scarcity stops asking, "What could my life become?" and starts asking, "How do I avoid losing what little I have?" That fear affects everything: career decisions, relationships, creativity, confidence, health, self-worth. Scarcity is heavy, not just financially, energetically. It creates tension inside the nervous system, that constant inner pressure of, what if something goes wrong? And when the mind stays in fear long enough, it struggles to think expansively. That is why financially stressed people often struggle making long-term plans. Their brain is busy surviving the present. This is not weakness. It is biology. Stress narrows focus. That is why healing your relationship with money matters beyond spreadsheets and budgeting. You must also heal fear, because fear-based decisions create unstable lives. And one of the most dangerous forms of scarcity today is invisible scarcity. Not physical poverty, mental poverty. People with opportunities still thinking like they are trapped forever. People with potential still believing they are powerless. People capable of building more, but emotionally frozen by fear. That fear becomes self-fulfilling, because the mind eventually creates behavior that matches its deepest expectations. If somebody deeply believes abundance is impossible for them, they often sabotage opportunities unconsciously. They procrastinate, undervalue themselves, avoid learning, avoid investing, avoid growth, avoid uncomfortable conversations. Because deep down, scarcity trained them to expect disappointment, and expectations shape behavior more than motivation does. That is why identity work matters financially. You cannot sustainably build abundance while emotionally identifying with permanent lack. At some point, your internal world and external world collide. That collision determines your future, and maybe nobody explained this to you growing up. Many people inherited financial fear emotionally before they inherited financial knowledge practically. They inherited anxiety, stress, shame, silence. Money became something tense, something dangerous, something emotionally charged. Families fought over it, avoided discussing it, secretly feared it. So children absorbed emotional patterns instead of literacy. That is why some adults feel guilt when spending on themselves. Others feel guilt charging fairly for their work. Others panic discussing finances openly. Others avoid checking bank accounts entirely. These are not just financial habits. They are emotional survival responses. And survival responses do not disappear automatically when income rises. That is why awareness changes everything. The moment you realize, my financial behavior is emotional too, you stop judging yourself blindly. You begin observing patterns, and observation creates possibility. You start asking better questions. Why do I feel anxious spending money even when I plan for it? Why do I seek comfort through shopping? Why do I fear investing in myself? Why do I stay small? Those questions matter deeply because self-awareness breaks unconscious cycles. And unconscious cycles are what keep many people financially trapped for decades. Not lack of intelligence, repeated emotional patterns. Now, listen carefully. Scarcity also creates impatience. A scarcity mindset struggles with delayed gratification because the future feels uncertain. That is why people trapped in fear often chase quick rewards, quick dopamine, quick spending, quick validation, quick money, quick success. Because internally, they do not trust stability. And without trust, patience becomes difficult. But real wealth requires patience, not passive waiting, intentional patience, the willingness to build gradually without panicking constantly. That is rare now, very rare. Modern culture rewards urgency. Everything screams, now, immediately, limited time. Hurry, don't miss out. Fear-based marketing thrives on scarcity psychology, and emotionally reactive people become vulnerable to manipulation. That is why calmness is powerful financially. A calm person thinks clearly, a fearful person reacts quickly, and quick emotional reactions often become expensive mistakes. That applies to investing too. Many people lose money because emotions overpower strategy. Fear when markets fall, greed when trends rise, panic during uncertainty, impulsiveness during excitement. Emotional instability creates unstable outcomes. That is why mastering yourself matters more than mastering trends. A disciplined, ordinary investor often outperforms an emotional, impulsive one long term because consistency beats chaos eventually, every time. And this next truth matters deeply. Scarcity is contagious. Spend enough time around hopelessness, and your thinking shrinks too. Spend enough time around negativity, and ambition starts feeling unrealistic. That is why environments matter financially. People absorb emotional standards from those around them. If everybody around you believes freedom is impossible, discipline becomes harder. If everybody normalizes debt and chaos, awareness begins feeling uncomfortable. Growth often requires changing environments mentally before changing them physically. That includes digital environments too. What are you consuming daily? Fear, comparison, outrage, luxury performance, hopelessness, or clarity? Education, wisdom, perspective, discipline? Because your mind becomes shaped by repetition, and repeated fear creates emotional exhaustion. Many people today are not just financially tired, they are psychologically overloaded. Constant bad news, economic panic, social pressure, comparison, political fear, algorithmic negativity. The nervous system never fully rests. And exhausted people struggle thinking strategically. That is why silence matters, reflection matters, intentional solitude matters. Financial clarity often arrives when noise disappears, not when noise increases. That is why some of the wisest financial decisions happen during quiet moments. A long walk, a peaceful morning, a night of honest reflection. Moments where performance disappears and truth finally speaks. And the truth often says something uncomfortable. You do not need as much as you thought. That realization is liberating because many people are exhausting themselves chasing lifestyles they do not even genuinely want. They inherited definitions of success unconsciously. Bigger, louder, more visible, more expensive. But mature wisdom eventually asks a different question. What kind of life actually feels peaceful to me? That question changes everything, because peace becomes the new measure of wealth, not applause, not appearance. Peace, the ability to wake up without panic, to think without constant pressure, to rest without guilt, to choose slowly instead of desperately. That is abundance too, and abundance begins internally before it stabilizes externally. A scarcity mindset sees only limitation. An abundance mindset sees possibility with responsibility. Notice the difference. Abundance is not delusion. It is not pretending reality does not exist. It is understanding that growth remains possible, that skills can improve, habits can change, income can grow, patterns can heal, lives can transform. That belief matters, because hopeless people rarely build disciplined futures. Hope creates movement, and disciplined hope becomes powerful, not fantasy. Vision, the willingness to believe your future does not need to repeat your past. That sentence alone can rebuild a life. Your future does not need to repeat your past. But change requires awareness first, and awareness often feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing, because truth removes excuses. You begin realizing how many emotional patterns shaped your financial reality silently, how fear controlled choices, how comparison distorted priorities, how insecurity influenced spending, how distraction delayed growth. But this realization is not punishment, it is awakening. And awakening changes everything, because once you see the pattern clearly, you cannot unsee it. And once you stop unconsciously feeding scarcity, you create space for something else: intentional growth. In the next chapter, we are going to expose the hidden addiction modern society rarely talks about honestly. Dopamine dependency, the endless cycle of stimulation, distraction, and emotional consumption that silently destroys focus, discipline, and financial growth. Because many people are not only broke financially, they are overstimulated mentally, and overstimulation is quietly stealing their future one distraction at a time. We're so glad you decided to watch our video. We're also really curious to know which cities around the world are watching our videos. Could you let us know which city, or at least which country, you're from? We always read every comment under our videos carefully. Thank you. Chapter 5. The Dopamine Economy. Why Distraction is Keeping You Poor. There was a time when boredom created builders. People sat with their thoughts long enough to invent, to reflect, to write, to plan, to improve. Now, most people cannot sit in silence for 5 minutes without reaching for stimulation. And that changes everything financially, because the modern economy discovered something terrifyingly profitable. A distracted mind spends more impulsively. A restless mind seeks relief constantly. An overstimulated person struggles with discipline. That is why attention has become one of the most valuable commodities on earth. Companies are no longer only competing for your money. They are competing for your nervous system, for your focus, your impulses, your emotions, your reactions. And if they control those things long enough, they eventually influence your financial behavior too. This is the dopamine economy. Infinite scrolling, short-form content, instant entertainment, constant notifications, algorithmic stimulation, everything engineered to keep your brain craving the next hit, the next video, the next purchase, the next emotional reaction, the next distraction. And slowly, Your attention span weakens. Your patience weakens. Your focus weakens. Your emotional regulation weakens. That affects money more than most people realize, because financial growth requires sustained attention, planning, learning, delayed gratification, consistency, long-term thinking. But overstimulation trains the opposite: immediate reward, constant novelty, emotional impulsiveness. That creates conflict internally. People say they want discipline while training distraction daily. They say they want freedom while feeding habits that weaken focus every hour. And focus matters financially more than ever before, because in a distracted world, the ability to concentrate becomes economic power. The people who can focus deeply build. The people constantly distracted consume. That is the split happening silently right now across society. Some are mastering attention. Others are losing themselves inside endless stimulation. And the consequences compound. A distracted person procrastinates more, learns slower, makes more emotional purchases, escapes discomfort constantly, struggles with consistency. All of that becomes expensive over time. That is why dopamine addiction is not just a productivity issue. It is a financial issue, because impulsive brains create impulsive lives. Think carefully about modern habits. How many people wake up and immediately consume information before thinking independently? Notifications, messages, feeds, videos, news, ads. The brain never fully stabilizes. It immediately enters reactive mode. And reactive minds rarely build extraordinary futures. They survive emotionally moment to moment. That survival state affects spending too, because overstimulation creates emotional fatigue, and emotionally fatigued people often seek easy relief. Convenience purchases, impulse ordering, mindless subscriptions, entertainment spending, dopamine shopping. Not because they are weak, because exhaustion lowers resistance. This is important to understand. Discipline is harder when the nervous system is overloaded constantly. That is why mental clarity matters financially. A clear mind sees long-term consequences better. An overstimulated mind seeks immediate comfort. And comfort has become a billion-dollar industry. Everything is designed for convenience now. Food delivered instantly, entertainment instantly, shopping instantly, validation instantly. But instant access creates dangerous habits when left unexamined, because easy pleasure can quietly weaken resilience. People lose tolerance for discomfort, and discomfort is necessary for growth, necessary for learning, necessary for building, necessary for investing, necessary for restraint. If every uncomfortable emotion immediately gets numbed through stimulation, discipline never strengthens. That is why many people struggle staying consistent. Their brain became addicted to novelty. Slow progress no longer feels rewarding enough, and real wealth often grows painfully slowly in the beginning. That frustrates overstimulated minds. They want visible results immediately, but compound growth is quiet at first, very quiet. That is why patience is now almost rebellious. A patient person resists manipulation. An impatient person becomes predictable, and predictability is profitable. If companies know you react emotionally, they can market emotionally. Urgency, scarcity, fear of missing out, flash sales, trending products, all designed to bypass reflection and trigger impulse. That is why awareness is powerful. The moment you slow down mentally, you regain control. You begin noticing patterns. Quote 42, quote 43, quote 44. Those observations matter because social media often monetizes insecurity. If people felt fully content, consumerism would slow dramatically. So dissatisfaction gets amplified constantly. You are shown curated lifestyles all day long. Perfect bodies, perfect vacations, perfect apartments, perfect success stories. And your nervous system absorbs comparison automatically. Even when logically you know it is curated, emotionally, it still affects perception. That subtle dissatisfaction creates spending pressure. People buy to reduce emotional discomfort, not because they need something, because they momentarily want to feel enough. But enoughness cannot be purchased permanently. That is why emotional consumption becomes endless. The relief fades quickly. Then the cycle repeats again. And maybe this next sentence explains modern life perfectly. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 45, underscore, more content, more stimulation, more distraction, yet less clarity, less peace, less focus, less fulfillment. Because consumption without reflection creates internal noise. And internal noise weakens financial awareness. You stop hearing yourself clearly. Your real goals, your real values, your real priorities. Everything becomes blurred by endless input. That is why solitude matters now more than ever. Silence is becoming a luxury. A quiet mind becomes rare, and rare qualities become valuable. A quiet mind can think strategically. A quiet mind can resist impulse. A quiet mind can observe emotions instead of obeying them instantly. That is power, especially financially, because every major financial transformation begins with behavioral change, and behavioral change requires awareness, not endless stimulation. That is why many disciplined people protect mornings carefully. No immediate scrolling, no emotional overload, no reactive consumption. They create mental space first, because the quality of your focus shapes the quality of your decisions, and decisions shape financial outcomes. Everything connects. Now listen carefully. Dopamine itself is not the enemy. Pleasure is not evil. Entertainment is not evil. The problem is unconscious dependency. When stimulation becomes escape, when distraction becomes identity, when silence becomes unbearable, that is dangerous, because the inability to sit with yourself creates vulnerability. People who cannot tolerate discomfort seek constant external soothing, and external soothing often costs money. That is why emotional resilience matters financially. Can you sit with boredom without consuming? Can you sit with stress without spending? Can you sit with loneliness without impulsive behavior? Can you sit with uncertainty without panicking? Those abilities create stability, and stability creates freedom. This is why some financially disciplined people appear calm during economic uncertainty. They trained emotional regulation, while others panic emotionally and make destructive decisions. Panic investing, panic spending, panic career, decisions. Emotional instability becomes financially expensive, again and again. That is why protecting your nervous system matters. Sleep matters, stillness matters, deep work matters, focused learning matters, because a fragmented mind struggles building a focused life. And modern technology fragments attention constantly. Most people underestimate this severely. They think distraction only wastes time. No, distraction changes identity slowly. You become what repeatedly controls your attention. If your attention is scattered, your life eventually feels scattered too. That includes finances, scattered spending, scattered priorities, scattered goals, scattered energy. And scattered energy rarely compounds into meaningful wealth. Focused energy does. That is why deep work is becoming economically valuable. A person capable of sustained concentration can outbuild distracted competitors dramatically over time, especially now. While everybody else reacts emotionally to endless noise, focused people quietly build skills, businesses, investments, opportunities. Silence becomes leverage. And maybe that is what you need most right now. Not more motivation, less noise. Because clarity often appears when distraction disappears. That is when truth becomes visible. What actually matters, what actually fulfills you, what actually deserves your time. Many people are chasing stimulation while starving for meaning. Those are different things. Meaning creates fulfillment. Stimulation creates temporary escape. One builds peace. The other demands constant repetition. That is why overstimulation leaves people emotionally exhausted. Their brain never fully rests, never fully processes, never fully reflects. And reflection is necessary for growth, financially too. Some of the most important breakthroughs happen during honest self-reflection. Quote, 46, quote, 47, quote, 48. That last question can change a life because concentrated effort creates extraordinary outcomes over time, not scattered effort. And the modern world is designed to scatter you. That means focus becomes an act of resistance, a radical one, especially when everybody else is emotionally reacting constantly. Now imagine what happens when somebody combines focus with discipline, with patience, with emotional control. Their entire financial trajectory changes, not instantly, but inevitably. Because consistent, focused action compounds powerfully. And in the next chapter, we are going to uncover why many people secretly sabotage financial growth the moment life becomes uncomfortable, why comfort addiction quietly destroys ambition, and why the inability to tolerate temporary discomfort keeps millions trapped in cycles they desperately want to escape. Chapter 6. Comfort Addiction, the silent killer of financial growth. Most people think poverty is only about lack of money. But there is another kind of poverty that destroys futures quietly. The inability to tolerate discomfort. That weakness ruins dreams every day, not dramatically, silently, because growth almost always asks for temporary discomfort first. Learning new skills feels uncomfortable. Saving money feels uncomfortable. Waking up earlier feels uncomfortable. Building discipline feels uncomfortable. Saying no feels uncomfortable. Starting over feels uncomfortable. Investing long-term feels uncomfortable. And modern society trained people to avoid discomfort at all costs. That is dangerous, because comfort can slowly become a cage. At first it feels harmless, skipping one workout, ordering food again, scrolling a little longer, avoiding difficult conversations, delaying learning, avoiding risk, choosing convenience repeatedly. But repetition builds identity, and eventually comfort stops feeling like a choice. It becomes dependency. That is when ambition weakens. Because comfort addiction creates passive living. People stop challenging themselves, stop growing, stop reflecting, stop building. They begin choosing ease over expansion constantly, and expansion always requires friction. Every meaningful transformation in life demands some level of temporary pain, not punishment, stretching. But people addicted to comfort interpret every challenge as suffering. Every inconvenience becomes unbearable. So they escape constantly. Entertainment, food, shopping, scrolling, distraction, numbing, and numbing destroys momentum. This is one of the biggest reasons many people stay financially stuck. Not lack of opportunity, lack of endurance. They quit too early emotionally. The first obstacle appears, and they retreat into comfort again. The budget feels restrictive. The business grows slowly. The investment takes time. The skill requires patience. So they abandon the process before compounding begins. That is tragic, because compounding rewards people who survive boredom. Read that again internally. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 49, underscore, underscore. And boredom has become unbearable for modern minds. People need stimulation constantly now, but financial growth often looks repetitive. Quiet routines, quiet discipline, quiet consistency, no fireworks, just steady behavior repeated over years. That is why many people sabotage themselves before breakthrough arrives. They mistake slow progress for failure, but slow does not mean ineffective. A tree grows slowly too. Roots deepen invisibly first. That invisibility frustrates impatient people. They want visible proof immediately. Yet almost everything meaningful grows beneath the surface before becoming visible externally. Muscle, wisdom, discipline, trust, financial stability. All of it compounds quietly first. That is why emotional resilience matters so much. Can you continue building when results are not visible yet? Can you stay disciplined without applause? Can you keep improving while nobody notices? That is where futures are built. Not during excitement, during consistency. And consistency requires tolerance for discomfort. This is why financially disciplined people often seem emotionally different. They developed a healthier relationship with delayed gratification. They understand temporary sacrifice can create permanent relief later. Most people reverse that equation. They seek temporary pleasure and create permanent stress. A night of emotional spending creates months of pressure. A moment of impulsiveness creates years of debt. A season of laziness creates decades of regret. Consequences compound quietly. That is why mature people begin respecting small habits deeply. Because small habits become large realities eventually. The uncomfortable truth is this: your future is usually hidden inside your daily tolerances. What discomfort do you avoid constantly? Hard conversations, planning, learning, discipline, self-reflection, risk, temporary sacrifice. Whatever you consistently avoid often becomes the area where life stays stagnant. That applies financially too. Many people avoid looking at bank accounts because truth feels uncomfortable. Avoid budgeting because awareness feels restrictive. Avoid learning about investing because complexity feels intimidating. Avoid changing habits because identity feels threatened. So avoidance continues, and avoidance becomes expensive. Very expensive, not immediately. Over years, that is how comfort addiction works. It charges interest slowly, and the bill eventually arrives as regret. There are people right now who would give anything to go back 10 years and build different habits. But life compounds whether you pay attention or not. That should wake you up. Because every year of unconscious living quietly shapes your future, and comfort culture encourages unconscious living constantly. Convenience over discipline, ease over growth, escape over reflection. People are trained to remove friction from everything, but friction builds strength. Without resistance, discipline weakens. That applies mentally too. A person who cannot tolerate emotional discomfort becomes easy to manipulate. Because fear controls them, urgency controls them, impulse controls them. That is why emotional resilience becomes financial power. A resilient person can stay calm during uncertainty. They do not panic every time life becomes uncomfortable, and uncertainty is unavoidable financially. Markets fluctuate, jobs change, economies shift, unexpected expenses happen. People addicted to comfort collapse emotionally during uncertainty. Disciplined people adapt. That difference changes entire lives. And maybe this next truth explains modern burnout perfectly. Many people are overstimulated, but underdeveloped, constantly entertained, rarely strengthened. Their attention is active, but their discipline is weak. That imbalance creates fragility. They struggle sitting with difficult emotions, struggle focusing deeply, struggle delaying gratification, struggle staying consistent, and all of those struggles eventually affect money too. Because wealth building is emotionally demanding. It requires patience when others chase trends, discipline when others overspend, focus when others distract themselves, long-term thinking when others seek instant reward. That makes financial literacy deeply psychological, not just mathematical. The person who masters themselves usually handles money better long-term too, because both require restraint, and restraint is becoming rare, which means it is becoming valuable. Now think about modern advertising carefully. Almost every message says the same thing emotionally. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 50, underscore, underscore. But nobody explains the hidden cost. Sometimes comfort now creates suffering later. And sometimes discomfort now creates freedom later. That is the real trade people rarely evaluate honestly. Temporary comfort versus long-term peace. Every financial decision lives somewhere inside that tension. Do I soothe myself now or strengthen myself for later? That question appears daily, and repeated answers become identity. And success amplifies chaos quickly. Now imagine somebody becoming wealthy while remaining emotionally impulsive. What happens? Overspending increases. Addictions increase. Emotional instability increases. Because more resources amplify existing habits. That is why financial literacy without emotional literacy becomes dangerous. People gain power externally before developing wisdom internally. And wisdom matters more than people realize, especially in a world addicted to appearance. Now, this next sentence may become one of the defining truths of this entire audiobook. The goal is not to become rich and emotionally broken. The goal is to become free and internally whole. That is different, completely different, because wholeness changes priorities. You stop chasing every trend. Stop needing constant applause. Stop sacrificing peace for performance. You become intentional, and intentionality creates sustainability. Now listen carefully. One of the greatest financial skills a person can develop is enoughness. The ability to recognize when enough is enough. Enough status, enough approval, enough comparison, enough endless chasing. Because without enoughness, wealth never feels satisfying. There is always another level, another target, another symbol, another achievement. That endless hunger creates exhaustion, and exhausted people lose connection with life itself sometimes. They become machines for achievement, productive externally, empty internally. That is tragic, because life is not only about producing, it is about experiencing meaning too. Connection, presence, peace, growth. Those things matter enormously, and financially wise people eventually understand money should support life, not replace it. That is maturity. Now, this does not mean avoiding ambition or financial growth. Build, create, expand, learn. But remember why. Not for endless validation, for freedom, for peace, for meaningful possibility. That distinction protects identity. Now think about your own future honestly. If you became financially successful tomorrow, who would you become emotionally? More grounded or more chaotic? More intentional or more impulsive? The answer matters because preparation for wealth begins long before wealth arrives. It begins through habits, boundaries, discipline, emotional regulation, daily, quietly. That is why this audiobook keeps returning to inner work repeatedly. Because outer success without inner structure becomes unstable eventually. Always. Now, maybe somebody listening feels emotional hearing this chapter, because deep down, you already know money alone will not heal everything. You know, peace matters. Purpose matters. Self-respect matters. That awareness is wisdom, real wisdom, and wisdom changes how you pursue financial growth entirely. You stop chasing money emotionally. You start building intentionally. That creates a completely different energy. Less desperation, less proving, less panic.